The member opposite is exceptionally biased, and I'm sure he'll acknowledge that. The reality is actually quite the opposite.
Madam Speaker, the member makes an unfounded allegation that I could be biased when all I did was read stats. Math has no bias. Numbers have no prejudice. Madam Speaker,
hey, that's
and I'd like to
something
thank
everyone
my
can enjoy.
colleague for sharing his time with me today. This is another engineered distraction on the part of this Prime Minister. He's trying to distract from his terrible record, even though he's only been in the role of Prime Minister for a short time. He's got an abysmal record, and he's desperately trying to change the channel for that. So let me just explain how I know this. This is an engineered distraction because the Prime Minister has never expressed opposition to Bill 21 in Quebec, not once. And if we look at the official submission, I have here a copy of the factum of the intervener, of the Attorney General of Canada. So anyone watching this debate, anyone in the gallery, anybody at home, any of the press that are trying to decide how to frame this conversation, let me read the opening line. This is the Attorney General of Canada officially putting before the courts the Government of Canada, this Liberal government's position on Bill 21. Let me quote it. Part A, this is Part 1, Section A, Paragraph 1, Line 1. I just want to stress that because this is the opening statement, the thing that the government leads with in its court submission. And let me quote. In accordance with his role as intervener, the Attorney General of Canada takes no position on any basis whatsoever on the constitutional validity of the provisions of the Act respecting the laicity of the state. Takes no position on any basis whatsoever. That is the government's position. So, you might be left wondering, what is the purpose of this engineered distraction? Well, it is to distract. It's to distract from the terrible cost of living crisis that this Liberal government started creating 10 years ago. 10 years ago with tax hikes on hardworking Canadians, on small business owners, the massive layering of regulations on the productive parts of the Canadian economy, the barriers to investment, the barriers to getting things built, the ban on shipping Canadian energy to other countries while foreign oil and foreign resources come into our country. Let me just go through a few of these crises, Madam Speaker, so you can properly understand why the government is so desperate to have this debate instead of a conversation about the hardships that Canadians are facing. This Prime Minister famously said that he would be judged on the prices at the grocery store. That's what he said during the election campaign. What's happened to prices at the grocery store, Madam Speaker? Food inflation continues to rise. It's now 70% above target. Food prices are 40% higher since this Liberal government took office. The debt crisis. He's created he's making the Trudeau debt crisis even worse. Remember, Justin Trudeau racked up more debt in the short time that he was in office than all the other prime ministers combined. All the other prime ministers combined. We could consider that World War I, World War II, the Great Depression. We had all these crises that faced Canada, but it took Justin Trudeau to massively rack up that debt. Since this Prime Minister took office, federal spending is up 8.4%. Remember when he promised during the election campaign? I mean, he put in writing, in black and white, when he was going to voters for their vote, he made a written guarantee to them that he would cap the deficit at $63 billion. The spending's gone up by 8.4%, Madam Speaker. He had the King of Canada, the King of the United Kingdom, come all the way from London. The King graciously accommodated that request and came to the Senate and read the throne speech. And in that throne speech, they had a commitment to cap spending at 2%. Just 48 hours later, the government tabled its spending estimates blew past that. I mean, what was the point of inviting His Majesty all the way across the ocean to come and read that speech if it wasn't even worth the paper it was printed on? I mean, that commitment, let me go down in history as the shortest lived Liberal promise ever. 48 hours, new record, new world record. And I'm embarrassed on behalf of this government. I know they're not embarrassed because you have to have shame to be embarrassed, but I'm embarrassed for them that they had His Majesty come over and participate in that kind of bait and switch for Canadians. Let's talk about the take-home pay crisis, Madam Speaker. The first people who suffer when inflation rears its ugly head are people who live paycheck to paycheck, people who have shift work, people who have to have second jobs to make ends meet. You want to know why, Madam Speaker? Because, see, when the government creates an inflation crisis, there's some winners and there's a whole lot of losers. The winners are the people who get the new money first. The asset managers, the hedge fund operators, the big banks. See, they get the new money before anybody else does, so they can buy up assets before prices go up. But that hardworking person in a hotel, the plumber, the mechanic, the people whose wages don't keep up with inflation, they have to start paying all the increased prices before they're able to secure any kind of pay increase. And so their paychecks go further. They work harder and are able to buy less. Since this Prime Minister took office, there are now 86,000 fewer Canadians who even earn a paycheck. That's because 86,000 people have lost their job just since this Prime Minister took office. He promised the fastest growing economy in the G7. Canada has the fastest shrinking economy in the G7. Unemployment in the GTA is now 9%, with 365,000 people out of work. 53.6%, Madam Speaker. You know what that is? That is the youth employment rate. That is the lowest it's been in almost 3 decades. 53%. That means just about half of young people in the workforce who are looking for work don't have jobs. The youth employment rate is the lowest in almost 3 decades. Household debt, Canadian household debt, is the highest in the G7. Bankruptcies are rising at the fastest pace since 2008. It's not just the cost of living crisis that's causing so much hardship in Canada and that this government's trying to distract from. We have a crime crisis as well. We have a Liberal government that decided to instruct judges to give bail to some of the country's worst, most violent and repeat offenders. What does that mean? Well, that means that now when someone's being arrested for the 14th, 15th, 20th time, that when they get booked by the police, they get back out on the street, often the very same day. I've heard from police associations who say that they will arrest somebody at about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening that they had already arrested earlier that morning. Those dangerous and repeat offenders have been let out by this federal government, and Canadians are sick and tired of it. But rather than take real action like adopt the Conservative 3 strikes and you're out policy, rather than apologize to Canadians for all the lives that have been shattered by the criminals this government set free, rather than do that, they're blocking and obstructing legitimate attempts to fix the bail system and bring in tougher penalties for dangerous and repeat offenders. So, Madam Speaker, that's what the Liberals are doing with this. They have engineered a distraction from their terrible record on cost of living, their terrible broken promises on fiscal responsibility, their terrible record on public safety, letting crime and chaos reign in our streets by putting the rights of dangerous offenders ahead of the rights of law-abiding Canadians. Madam Speaker, it is shameful, but this Prime Minister is employing the same tactic of his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, dividing to distract, distracting from his terrible record, and he is proving to be just another Liberal.
Questions and commentaires. Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, it is a bit of a stretch, I must admit that, in terms of the speech and what we're supposed to be talking about today. But let me continue with that stretch. The member opposite is exceptionally biased, and I'm sure he'll acknowledge that. The reality is actually quite the opposite. You know, we'd love to be able to talk more about the things in which we are actually doing. We could talk about the 22 million Canadians that benefited by the tax break. We could talk about the Build Canada legislation. Not to mention the different projects, whether it's copper mines in BC and Saskatchewan, it's LNG in BC, it's the nuclear energy in Ontario, it's the Port of Montreal in the province of Quebec, it's the attention being given to Atlantic Canada, all regions, all areas of economic development while protecting the environment is something that is important to the government. But with respect to the motion that the Bloc have brought forward, I'm wondering if the member could give his thoughts on whether it's the federal government or parliaments or legislatures using preemptive statements related to using the notwithstanding clause.
Honourable member for Regina Capel.
Madam Speaker, the member makes an unfounded allegation that I could be biased when all I did was read stats. Math has no bias. Numbers have no prejudice. They come into the world because of calculations. And let me look at some of those calculations. Spending on consultants has gone up 37% from $19 billion to $26 billion. Spending on bureaucrats by this Liberal government is up 6% from $59 billion to $63 billion. There's no bias in that. Those are just numbers that we take from departmental websites and estimates and things like the Parliamentary Budget Officer doing dispassionate, independent analysis of government spending. The government talks about how many Canadians are being affected by their policy. How about every single Canadian being affected by the inflation crisis that this government caused?
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Aaron here, Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe. We cover Canadian federal politics. We do a live show every day about the question period. It's always interesting. A lot of a pageant. We also cover behind the scenes. That's where it really goes down. The committees and just the floor of the House and Commons outside of question period can be a very interesting place. They don't put it on television. If you want to see the real deal, get yours right here. Canadian federal politics. Everyone has an opinion. My goodness. Till the next video, gang, which will be like in a couple of hours. We do a lot of videos here. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one. We're out.
Oh, yeah.
I think it is extraordinary that Mark Carney has become the Prime Minister of Canada. He did a terrible job in Britain.
Oh, yeah.